he was the one who actually conceived of this idea of what it means to be a person who belongs to Singapore.
It's only because of that combination of qualities that Rajaratnam had that Singapore could get into the United Nations and be accepted as an independent nation in the world of nations.
From a journalist to one of the pioneers of modern-day Singapore, S. Rajaratnam's bold outlook on our nation's future shaped our lives as we know it today.
You had somebody who gave the country its intellectual and ideological DNA.
And the fact that we are here today thinking that this is also natural is actually far from the truth from what he was experiencing and that generation was experiencing when they started off.
Born in Jaffna, Sri Lanka in 1915, Sinnathamby Rajaratnam was brought to Seremban, Malaya when he was just 6 months old. There, he was brought up in a rubber plantation where his father worked, surrounded by fellow Jaffna Tamils.
So it was not much exposure to the different races until he went to school. And then he began to be very interested in the world beyond his own surroundings. His good friends are, interestingly, people very different from what he grew up with at home.
And I suppose at that young age, one doesn't think about it as a sort of a concept of multiculturalism or multiracialism.
It was at school where his passion for reading first began to flourish. He had a natural talent for writing and a deep appreciation for the English language. He was also encouraged to read widely by his uncles and teachers.
He would read anything from fantasy to comics to science fiction to philosophy. For a young boy, he's very advanced for his age. He enjoys thinking about the broader issues about the meaning of life.
Rajaratnam was somebody who had an unquenchable thirst to know things, to be exposed to new things. He wanted to be exposed to new ideas. He was really interested in how other people lived.
He's just developing this idea that the world is one.
In 1935, Rajaratnam left for London to study law, a choice made by his father who was certain that Rajaratnam would do him and his family proud.
London in those days was the center of intellectual and moral ferment.
The elites from the colonies would go to London, study there, be exposed to these liberal ideas, Enlightenment ideas about equality and fairness and justice and freedom.
All these big ideas were being thrown about and debated, and he was in the center of it.
World War II caused Rajaratnam to lose all forms of communication with his family back in Seremban. No longer pressured by his family's expectations of him, he decided to pursue what he truly felt passionate about, which was journalism.
Now, what drew him away from the law was his deep interest in current affairs, in philosophy, and in world affairs.
He began to be drawn towards the left-wing crowd because, number one, they enjoyed talking books, which is his natural inclination.
So the kind of people he was meeting were liberal-minded, people who were, in a way, rather anti-colonial, right?
He went to the book launch of a writer called Cedric Dover. Cedric Dover is interested in writing about the different races, and he showed through his writings that there's no such thing as a pure blood, as a pure caste. To Raja, that was a blinding revelation. At that time, Malaya is a colonial country. There's no idea of justice or equality. But in Rajaratnam's mind, these are all something that needs to be questioned.
Being in the hot seat of politics itself, I think that was what changed Rajaratnam. He could see politics in action. He understood how ideas had to be translated into action.
The Indian nationalists that were domiciled in London were using their short stories to basically question the assumptions of caste and about being a British colonial citizen. So Rajaratnam, being exposed to that milieu, began to see that journalism was actually a very powerful role that he could play.
Rajaratnam turned to writing for income during the war. He wrote for newspapers and left-wing publications, but also wrote fiction.
So his first writings were fiction, short stories. But they were very powerful, so powerful that he was recognized as one of the leading Indian writers. And that's one aspect of him, I think, that is quite elusive, but also most fascinating because it shows you the evolution of the man, a very creative mind who has a passion for communication as a storyteller.
It was also during his time in London where he met his Hungarian wife, Piroshka Feher. Rajaratnam knew his family would not approve of him marrying outside of his clan, which led to his quiet marriage.
The fact that he rebelled against his family's very traditional values in wanting to arrange a marriage for him, he rejected it completely, right? To do this, not just to articulate these principles, but to live it.
Rajaratnam returned to Malaya in 1947 and started working as a journalist at the Malaya Tribune. Though his father wanted him to return to London to complete his law studies, his heart was set on journalism.
He joined the Singapore Standard, where he had a column called I Write As I Please. And it was a great platform for him to be as radical, as opinionated as he wanted. And he used it to champion his ideals and his ideas. Among his fans for his columns were Lee Kuan Yew and Dr. Goh Keng Swee, who used to be a civil servant. Mr. Lee, who was then a legal advisor to the Postal and Telecoms Union, wanted to mount a campaign against the British. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew asked Raja whether he could support him in his postal campaign through his columns. And Rajaratnam was, of course, always ready to seize any controversy to embarrass the British. At the same time, he was quite fascinated by this man, Lee Kuan Yew. He joined forces, and together they managed to create such an interest in the postal strike that the British backed down. So that was the beginnings of the relationship between Lee Kuan Yew and Rajaratnam, but also the beginnings of the formation of the PAP.
In 1954, Rajaratnam founded the People's Action Party along with Lee Kuan Yew, Toh Chin Chye and Goh Keng Swee. His skill in articulating ideas was instrumental in helping Lee Kuan Yew draft the election manifesto and his rally speeches.
According to Mr. Rajaratnam, he said he had to be persuaded to join politics because he enjoyed journalism and he thought that being a journalist, he can make an impact. But Mr. Lee Kuan Yew persuaded him to leave journalism to join politics in 1959. This was a group of people that he felt could make an impact.
You can form a political party on an idea, you can form a political party on a grievance, but a long-standing political party, and a party that could sustain and continue to draw support, was one that required an ideological backbone. And Rajaratnam was that backbone.
Rajaratnam fully stepped into politics when he resigned as a journalist and contested in the 1959 Legislative Assembly General election, where he was elected as an assemblyman for the Kampong Glam constituency.
All the PAP first generation leaders had excellent command of English, but the difference, I think, was that Rajaratnam had a particular humanity about him as a person, which then comes out, manifests itself in his writing that touches the common folk. He was able to convey sometimes rather complex ideas in a way which people understood immediately.
Rajaratnam was appointed Singapore's first Minister for Culture in 1959, a position that was quite uncommon worldwide at that time.
Back then, this was considered to be a very, very important position because the Ministry of Culture, first of all, controls your mass media. And the mass media in those days obviously did not include the internet. So it was very tight-knit. So there would be an English channel, a Chinese channel, the Tamil channel, the Malay channel, which we used to have 4 different channels. And so he was very anxious to try to make sure that Singaporeans as a whole, with this media, could get the kind of exposure to different languages, races, their perspectives as he had.
He set a mission for himself, which is to create a just and fair society, regardless of race, language, or religion. That's his mantra. But how do you do that? Because at that time, people were still divided by race, language, or religion. So he used the platform of culture. For the first time, he got the different races and religious groups to come together and mount a multicultural show called, in those days, Aneka Ragam. For the first time, you had the Indian drums together with Chinese opera and then with the Malay ronggeng dance. People are coming together to enjoy a concert together and to experience what it feels like to be multicultural. And even starting at that level requires a great imaginative leap, which he had.
The early years of nation building, it didn't fall naturally on the Minister of Culture, but he took a primary role in shaping your national values, the design of the national flag. It was To Chin Chai's baby actually, but that was an early draft, which it was Rajaratnam who took it through to its final version.
We, the citizens of Singapore, pledge ourselves as one united people, regardless of race, language, or religion, to build a democratic society based on justice and equality, so as to achieve happiness, prosperity, and progress for our nation.
The finalized version of Singapore's national pledge was drafted by Rajaratnam in 1966. Through the pledge, he wanted to convey the idea that Singaporeans could be united as one, regardless of race, language, or religion.
Today it's become such a natural thing for Singaporean society, but in his day, in 1966, when he wrote it, it required a great leap of the imagination and a great belief in the future and in the power of the human will.
He was really quite important and instrumental, charting the ideological compass of the state. He was the one who actually conceived of this idea of what it means to be a person who belongs to Singapore.
Rajaratnam wholeheartedly believed that Singapore could be a society that treated everyone equally, despite the challenges.
He firmly believes that all these categories of race, religion, and language are artificial. They are all man-made. His passion is to help Singaporeans see that. He needed to help them to believe that to become a united nation, you have to disregard your differences.
It's not so hard to build a state. It's far harder to build a nation. And so Rajaratnam looked beyond the creation of the state. How do you get people to feel that this is their home?
When Singapore gained independence in 1965, Rajaratnam became the nation's first foreign minister. His tenure in this role significantly contributed to Singapore's international recognition.
When Singapore separated from Malaysia, most of the world thought Singapore would not survive. But Rajaratnam managed to win the support of enough friends and also tap on the influence of other powers who can help to win votes for Singapore and help Singapore get into the United Nations. Because he's the first face that the world sees at the United Nations, a face that's measured, that has gravitas, and that wants to make sure that Singapore doesn't take sides. It's only because of that combination of qualities that Rajaratnam had that Singapore could get into the United Nations and be accepted as an independent nation in the world of nations.
And he started this, standing in the international arena far greater than our size merits, really.
感謝老闆李先生及伊樹灣醫生嘅支持，並且真歡喜嘅接受祝福。第二日，聯合國大會新選出嘅主席，意大利嘅范胡尼博士提議學新加坡加入聯合國。
Rajaratnam also concurrently took on the role of Labour Minister in 1968, a role which he served till 1971.
Lee Kuan Yew put Rajaratnam in charge of Ministry of Labour precisely because he knew that Rajaratnam would rise to the challenge. He steered through the most far-reaching labour reform in the nation's history, and that became a key competitive advantage for Singapore's economic strength. So without him as Labour Minister, one would ask whether Singapore could have survived that period of great uncertainty.
He was known as one of the most avuncular ministers, always open, always smiling, always has an ear for everybody. But they saw him as a tough as nails politician. When it came to oppositional politics, I mean, if you were at the receiving end of his barbs in Parliament, or in the press, well, you wouldn't feel too comfortable.
Rajaratnam described himself as not a natural politician. He is actually a reserved person. But Rajaratnam always stood out for his optimism. Lee Kuan Yew always said that even in the depth of his despair, Rajaratnam would be the one that's always giving him the heart to carry on fighting.
Rajaratnam continued on as a key figure in Singapore's politics, serving as Second Deputy Prime Minister till 1985 and later Senior Minister in the Prime Minister's office till his retirement in 1988. The passing of Rajaratnam in 2006 left many Singaporeans with heavy hearts, as they mourned the loss of a key figure who played a crucial role in building Singapore. His countless contributions to Singapore's growth, from promoting multiculturalism to putting the nation on the map despite the skepticism, will forever be deeply ingrained in our history.
I would encourage the young readers to read both my books to get the full flavor of the lessons that Rajaratnam has for us. I would encourage them to come to the chat book showcase that the National Library Board has put up in the National Library building, because you can ask questions to the chat book and they will answer.
The important thing to know or to appreciate about somebody like S. Rajaratnam, and he threw himself into trying to make this a template for a more humane, fair and just society. And he never wavered till the end of his days.
Life is full of threats and dangers being in a small country. And to survive and to succeed, you need to have that never say die spirit. All that Rajaratnam has always been saying is the future is what you make of it. The only certainty in life is an unformed future to be shaped to your will. So the question is always, what kind of future do you want? He always dares to imagine a better future, a better way out, and dares to pursue it to its bitter end.